Welcome to the Indie Pub, a laid-back interview show dedicated to the world of self and indie publishing. I'm your host, Jay Rushing, author of the self-published fantasy noir novel Radio, and a beverage buff with a passion for deep dives and good times. Every 2 weeks, a guest will step into the pub with a publishing-related topic and a favorite drink for us to explore and enjoy. Whether you want to sharpen your craft, snag a new cocktail recipe, or just have a laugh, there's always a seat and a full glass waiting for you at the Indie Pub. Welcome to the Indie Pub. Today's guest is Antoine Bandele, author of the Kishi, By Sea and Sky, and the T.J. Young and the Orishas series, as well as many other works. He's also the founder of the audiobook production company AB Book Services. Antoine has been kind enough to let me pick his brain on two different areas of expertise today: African folklore in fantasy and audiobook production for indie authors. But before we dive in, tell us a little bit about what we're drinking here in the pub today.
Oh, yes. So I have a Moscow Mule here, which is something I discovered at this Asian restaurant at Century City because one of my friends, I think, ordered it. And I was like, what is that? He's like, you should try it. It's amazing. And then I tried it, and yes, it is amazing. So it's basically a combination of it's really simple, actually. It's just ginger beer and vodka. Literally, and then you put some ice in it. And sometimes you might put a lime in it sometimes, too, if you want like a little bit of like extra. But yeah, it's a very simple drink, and you should try it at home.
God, I love this drink. It's one of those ones where I feel like it doesn't matter when or where or how. If someone's like, hey, would you like a Moscow Mule? I'm like, yes, I would right now. That sounds delicious. All right. And so go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
So I'm Antoine. I originally was supposed to go into like the film industry or whatever. I did screenwriting right out of high school. I got a scholarship for a screenwriting award that I got during a summer program for inner city filmmakers. And so I did that, and then I went into YouTube. And then in 2017, and this is something that I've always realized, that Kindle has a direct publishing service. And this is something I was realizing about like back when I was in high school, 2008, because I wanted to do a comic book with my friends based on a short film that I did in high school. And there was a thing called KDP, and it has the same video they've been using since 2008. They have not updated their intro video on Amazon. But I never really looked into it like seriously until much later. I think it wasn't until the end of season 6 of Game of Thrones. And I just literally was just looking up online, like, hey, is there an African Game of Thrones? And I found a lot of interesting fantasy books, but not like necessarily the ones I specifically was looking for. Mm-hmm. And what tends to be the origin story for most writers is that, I just couldn't find the book that I wanted to read. Yeah. So I just wrote it myself. And that's essentially how I came into doing all this. And then the audiobooks came about because of my co-writing that I did with another author. I did the audio because I just naturally was doing that already because I'm a multimedia major. I was a YouTuber. Like, this stuff was already like natural to me. I was like, it's just audio. Like, I can do that. He's like, who did your audio? And I was like, I did. I had a friend who I used to work with at Apple Retail who came in and like recorded it.
Nice.
He's like, oh man, you should probably be doing this as a service for other indies. And I was like, I don't think anybody would really want. And he's like, dude, try it. And I did it. And now I'm full time with audiobooks.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, cool. So up first today is African folklore in fantasy. So when we're talking about folklore of an entire continent, it obviously includes a massive catalog of stories from a broad and super diverse set of regions, cultures, etc. So in your work, do you draw from multiple traditions across Africa, or do you have one or just a few that you kind of stick with that are your main bread and butter?
Yeah, so there's two basically that I do. There is the adult series. And when I say adult, I don't mean like erotica. I mean adult, just not young adult, not middle grade. That one is more of a pan-African fantasy based on a completely new world that I've created based upon mythology, folklore from the African continent and the African diaspora. There is another series I have, which is young adult. That one is very specific in its mythology. That one's only dealing with the Orishas, which is from the Yoruba people who are from Western Nigeria, Eastern Benin. Also, there's a lot of them in the diaspora, primarily in Brazil and Central America. But yeah, depending on which series we're talking about, my adult series, more of a Pan-African hodgepodge, more like Last Airbender in the sense that that's a very Pan-Asian work. Mm-hmm. That's a very Pan-African work. And then the contemporary one, which is specific.
Nice. So with the traditions you have worked with and incorporated, can you give us some of the key features and maybe some of who their key figures are?
So that would be a little easier to discuss with the Orisha stuff because that's like
for
way
sure.
more narrow. But the key features of that is it's a pantheon, just as you would have with like the Egyptian gods or with the Greek or Roman gods. But they're very tied to nature. So, for instance, we have Oya. She is the goddess of storm and thunder. Then you have I was going to say Thor, but Shango, who's very similar to Thor, who he has the power of lightning. You have Obatala, who is a sky deity who actually was the creator of human bodies. You have Eshu, the mischief maker. He is a trickster kind of deity, but also a trickster in the sense that he gives you lessons through trickery, not like a malicious trickster where he's just trying to push you off your path. And there's a bunch. Like there's so many. There's some tied to disease specifically. There's some as very specific as just like overseeing cassava, like the cassava, the food, like just looks over that. So yeah, it's pretty big. There's I think supposed to be something like 400 plus Orishas, which I don't even know what all of them are. I have to talk to like a Babalawo being a priest in the Yoruba faith system of what all 400 are. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot, and they're all tied to some. The ocean, Yamoja and Olokun, do that. Lagoons, you have Alosa, and one other I'm thinking about. Yewa does a little bit of lagoons too. But there's so many. I can just go on for days about these names.
With a big group like that, it makes me wonder: is it similar to both like the Norse and the Greeks, where there's a whole lot of family drama, or like a lot of fighting and bickering?
I actually was just writing about that because I'm writing book 2 of TJ, about to wrap it up almost. I'm actually in Act 3, and there's a funny thing between the two deities, Oya and Shango. And there's an ancient story about how he once chased her across the skies and tried to take her head, and that created a lightning storm and stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of little drama that goes on. Like the main deity, who's kind of like the Zeus, Olodumare, had to like put Olokun in chains at the bottom of the sea, like in the Atlantic, because he was messing around and trying to drown humans on the coast of Nigeria. And there's always all sorts of drama like that for sure.
Nice. And so what was it? Thinking about you with your adult work, you've got this Pan-African look, but what was it that drew you specifically to the Yoruba traditions?
Well, it's something I always want to do because I knew that was my background. Like my last name is Nigerian. Specifically, it's Yoruba. It means born away from home. Or if you do the direct translation of it, it should be Bamidele, which means to return home. So both of them work. Born away from home because that's what I was. I was born away from the motherland, and then to return home is kind of like what I'm doing with my work. So both of those, like, they totally fit in with what I'm doing.
That's cool.
But yeah, I went into that because I wanted to do something contemporary. Because I found that my voice is more natural in contemporary because it's literally my voice. It's only like a step away because I'm not a young adult anymore. I'm definitely like an adult. But it's just easier that I can make like in the first chapter I can make references to LeBron James and Steph Curry. I can't really do that in my older
for sure.
archaic Pan-African one. And a lot of times I'll be writing like, will they even speak this? Like, would this work in this time period? I don't have to have that in my contemporary one. But of course the tie to my ancestry too was a big draw for that.
Cool. So thinking about kind of folklore in general, kind of worldwide, it basically tackles similar human issues, but through its own lens, its own style. Could you give us a couple examples, one or two, of ways in which the folklore that you work with maybe handled something in a unique or surprising way compared to all of the Western folklore that we get hit over the head with constantly?
Well, one that I liked, and there's the reason I did the first one, the Kishi, is I actually designed it based on the monster or the creature first, and decided, okay, so what character would have most challenge against this? And the idea with the Kishi is that they are very vampiric in nature. They have a very handsome human face in the front, but they swoon you, women in particular, so they can eat you with their hyena head. Or if they like you enough, they'll impregnate you with their demon child, and the demon child will eat their way out of the woman parts,
nice.
So it's very crazy like that. So with having that idea of this demon that is this way, I was like, what if I had a monk who came to like this village who was infested with like these Kishi. And he was told to be a pacifist, that, you know, you have to always find the compromise between people and compromise. So I was like, well, what if you have a demon that you can't really compromise with? What do you do then? Like, how do you come to terms with that? And that was like the whole catalyst for the push of that story, which I found pretty interesting. In particular, that very first one that I did.
Mm-hmm. And so is the Kishi, is that an amalgamate concept you came up with, or is that
that's a legit
an actual
thing? Yeah.
thing?
So
Okay.
it's from Angola. I believe it's come from the Kimbudum people or the Imbudum people. I kind of forgot what the name of them, but it's in Angola, the country, the modern country of Angola.
Okay.
And yeah, it's completely like even one of my readers came to me or emailed me and was like, "Thank you for writing that story. Like, my grandfather used to tell me that story about the Kishi." Cool. And he had passed, I think, a few years prior to her sending that email. And she said it was like, you know, it brought back memories of like her grandfather, stuff like that. I was like, oh my God, like the words touch people. I didn't know. Like this is like that was like, you know, gave me goosebumps, like getting something like that. But yeah, it's definitely a established folklore.
Cool. Did you bring in other for lack of it, other monsters from mythology into there as well? And is it all from Angola then, or is it?
No, it's a spread. So that particular story is the one that's the Pan-African one.
Yeah,
so while I was focused on that one, like for that story in particular, just on that, I did make mentions of like other creatures.
Okay.
Like even mentioned like stuff like dragons, but I say like they're like way far to the north, like in my story.
Cool. Okay.
But I have it Impundulu, which are the lightning birds that come from South Africa. I have the Tokolosh or Tokoloshi, depending on how you pronounce it, which are like these kind of gremlin-like characters.
Oh, I've heard of them. Yeah.
You heard of them? Yeah. So there's a bunch, you know, Aziza, which are like fairies that are from West Africa. There's a bunch. What the Mazomba, which is like this huge water creature. Nyami Nami, which is I think a water snake, a demon sort of thing. There's so many. So yeah, I do make mention of all of them, and they all share and all live within like the same world.
Nice. And was that a standalone, or is that a series, or gonna be a series?
The Kishi is a standalone. I'm thinking about making a series, but a standalone series of like a monster every week kind of a thing. So like the first one was about cool. Kishi in it. But right now my young adult series is the one that's really taking off. So I'm like focusing on that one at the moment.
Nice. And what, I haven't read the young adult series. Is it kind of similar, like dealing with the mythological monsters and things like that, or what's the tone and vibe of that series?
So that one's more similar to Percy Jackson, but you know, instead of Percy Jackson, because the main character, he is not very good with magic. He only just gets discovery of his magic at the beginning of the book, so he has to go to a remedial summer camp for magic students that don't do magic very well. So think like Noah Longbottom. Before he probably went to Hogwarts, he probably had to go to some like remedial summer school or something before he was accepted. So he's basically doing that, and in doing so, he's trying to uncover the mystery of his sister's death, who was supposed to be like the Harry Potter, the Promised Child, and people are trying to find who's the new person to look up to. And in it, he's discovering the Orishas, which are these ancient deities who are interacting with him.
So my next question is more of a craft question, but I'm curious because I only read adult fiction. So you've written for the entire range from kids all the way up to adults. When you're including that folklore, does it change? Does the way you approach the folklore change as you move through the age groups, or do you have a similar technique and take on it with all of your work?
Oh, you know, most definitely. Like, there's definitely a different tone from I'll have with Eshu the Trickster God, dealing with someone in particular, or even the way you word certain things, the way you present certain things, because there is a bit of, in that first short story, I do address alcoholism. It's such a hard thing to say. There's someone who's an alcoholic in that story. And I do it in a way that works for a middle grade / young adult audience, versus if I would have done it in my adult series, it probably would have been a lot more dark and a little bit worse off, like probably a little bit more violent too. But yes, definitely, depending on which age group it is being written to, what audience, you know, the story is for, there are going to be differences in the same sort of mythologies, you know, just presented differently.
So kind of piggybacking on that question, are there characters or stories from those mythologies that you would or wouldn't choose to use, or would you use it and just shift it? Or
yeah, I would use everything and then shift it. Like so, like we were just talking about the Kishi, who were like these vampiric half hyena, were hyena type people. In the beginning of my adult series, it's quite bloody because there's a death right at the start of it. It's very similar to like any kind of like crime mystery story where the death happens at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's described very brutally. You hear everything. I hear everything. You get the visual of all the blood and all the crunching and all the broken bones and all that. But when I have it I have the Kishi appear in my young adult series as well, but it's more of a cutesy thing. So it's like the Kishi fighting against this other creature called the Oloko. But it's just like kind of like, oh, they're just fighting in the forest, kind of like an off-screen thing. You just hear like, things going on. But if I describe that in my adult series, it would probably be a lot more like visceral in that description.
Nice. Yeah, I used to be an elementary school teacher, believe it or not. So I'm really interested in that series. I think that would be, God, my kids would have just eaten it up in the classes I've taught. That's really, really interesting stuff. And how many books are there right now for the
total? Okay, let's see. We have the Kishi. Oh, you mean for the TJ series?
Yes. Yeah.
There's 3 stories out for that one. So we have Will of the Mischief Maker, The Gatekeeper Staff, and When the Wind Speaks. And I'm currently writing The Windweaver Storm right now.
Okay, cool. Nice. And where would that be available for people to check out?
Oh, so anything you want to find from me, best way to do it is AntoineBandele.com, and that will send you to all the places where it's sold, whether it's talking about Audible, Amazon, Walmart, Kobo, Google, Apple Books, all those places.
Nice. Oh, yeah, it would make sense. So you have them up in audio as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very much so. Audio is like almost a primary for me at this point. Like I actually work and write towards the audio before I even finish my manuscript.
Oh, cool. So like the tone and voice and pacing that you're actually writing with, you've got the audio in mind.
It's with audio in mind. Yeah, audio in mind first for me.
Okay, cool. We'll definitely come back to that when we get to the audio portion of the episode. Right. That's really interesting. Okay, so actually, final question for the African folklore portion of our episode. So out of all of your research you've done, who is your favorite character from African folklore and why?
Okay, so I kind of made this one up, but it's still sort of tied to African folklore or African language, as to say. Okay. So in the Swahili language, paka means cat, and in my world, I call it cat min. And I have this character named Shamari, who is basically like this jokester, one-liner cat pirate, who's like the best swordsman on the squad, and he's always just making all these quips as he's like somersaulting over people's heads and like fighting and grumbling about being woken up too early in the morning because he has to like do the curls on his like fur and stuff like that. Nice. He's definitely the most fun. But I think that's just any kind of cat person you'll have is going to be fun. But someone who's actually tied to actual African folklore will be the Aziza, who, funny enough, Shamari has a crush on one of the Aziza, who are like these long living creatures. In my world, at least, they're long living creatures. Usually fairies are long living. But I had the idea of adapting it a little bit for the Aziza, and that they are, I know there's a term for there's like a scientific term for this, and I completely forgot what it is, but it's when they only have one gender that can reproduce on their own. I know asexual. It's something else.
I know
entirely.
The term you're talking about. Okay, I also can't remember it, but I do know. Yes, yeah.
But at least we know what we're talking about. But they have that similar to Asari in Mass Effect. If your listeners are familiar with that video game series, where they are one gender, not really female, even though everybody calls them female. But it's just that's just what they look most similar to in terms of human eyes. Mm-hmm. But it's like that too, and I have that similar sort of idea with the Aziza, which I think is very interesting.
Nice. All right, so let's jump back to our drink. So in every episode, we always talk about taste and smell because they're the two most overlooked and underused senses in writing. So thinking about a Moscow Mule, what notes are you getting? What flavors come out to you? What's your general takeaway as you sip a Moscow Mule?
Well, it's definitely going to be the ginger. That's the thing you're going to taste the most. And ginger has a very... I don't even know how to explain what ginger is. It's spicy. I mean, sometimes people have it for when they're sick and stuff like that because it clears up their sinuses and stuff like that. So you definitely get like a kick. It's a drink with a kick, I would say.
Yeah. What ginger? Did you go ginger beer or ginger ale for this one?
Ginger beer.
Which variety?
Oh, I have the bottle in my kitchen right now. I forgot what it is.
Okay.
I don't remember, but
So if yours is pretty spicy, is it Fever Tree potentially? That's the one I went with.
Possibly, because this one has a kick.
Has a kick. That's one thing I love about this drink is how it depending on which ginger beer or ginger ale you go with, you can really vary how much bite it's given you. And then lime or no lime, like you said earlier.
Yeah, lime or no lime. Yep.
Yeah, I haven't done it yet, but I've toyed with the idea of trying it with salt, like a margarita.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Like it should work. It probably
should, right? You'd think.
Yeah.
I mean, the flavors are basically in the wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I've been tempted to try is a Moscow Mule with gin, which I'm sure is a thing somewhere.
Yeah, I've had every time I go to like a new like state or country, I always have their local Moscow Mule. Like when we went to Hawaii recently,
nice.
They had like a tropical mule, which I thought was very interesting.
Nice. I can't remember, when you do a mule, do you do the copper cup or just a normal cup?
Copper cup.
Yeah, same.
So if I have it available, yes, but use a copper cup if it's available.
I agree. I feel like it's fine without the copper cup, but there's something about that, penny taste.
It's
it
like
seems
drinking
weird.
a Coke without like the bottle. Like it's different having like a fountain Coke or having like a Coke in a bottle,
For sure, yeah. Yeah. I went with the Fever Tree, and then God, I wish I could remember the name of a vodka. I feel like that's one of the nice things.
Like a Costco, like I think it's a Kirkland vodka is what I have.
There's one brand, I think they have it in the US, that would be perfect for this if you can find it. I think, like, do you guys have Safeways in LA?
Not in LA. That's in the States. Like when I go to visit my family in Denver, they have a bunch of Safeways.
Yeah.
But we're more Ralph's, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's.
Gotcha. Okay.
Superior.
One of them so there's one called Sobieski.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a red label. But from what I understand, it's basically Belvedere, the fancy vodka.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, well, we make really fancy vodka and it's good, but it doesn't take anything to make vodka. So let's do a cheapy one. And I'm not sure if they bought the company or if it's just their company, but it's technically a Polish vodka, and it's just so good and it's so cheap. It's like one of the $10 bottle type vodkas, and it's so good. So if you ever see it, I highly recommend snagging that one.
Red tag, red or red cap, you said.
Yeah, I know that doesn't narrow it down for vodkas, but
that's true. A lot of them have those red caps, huh?
Yeah, but anyway, that's definitely one to try.
Mm-hmm.
So Moscow Mule. What are your other go-to drinks if you're going out into the world?
Just like a Merlot, or like recently I just had a good one. Oh my God, what was it called? Oh, it's because I was in Vegas. I was in 20 Books Vegas for the indie author conference that they have out there. And I went to Vegas and they had like this Dole Whip mixed drink of like 5 shots of vodka or whatever, like in the bottom of it. Like it's really scary because you don't taste it. And it's like I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas, but they have like these really long cups that they give to people. Yeah. Like some that are like the size of you. They'll sneak in a whole lot of vodka or tequila or whatever you would want. And then just like sweeten it up with some sort of like sorbet or like Dole Whip mix or whatever. Very dangerous. So be careful.
Yeah.
Drink responsibly.
Yeah. Last time I was in Vegas years ago, but we were walking down the strip, and we turn and we see margaritas in a Slurpee machine.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, well, that's genius. And then we look and it's $2 a cup. We're like, well, that's even more genius. And so, of course, you have one or a few because it's $2 for Slurpee margarita, and that did not end well.
That's why they have them right off of the casino, because they're like, yo, do this first and then go spend some money with us. Why don't you?
Yeah. The color, it was one of those like definitely not blue, but definitely not green colors where you're not quite sure. Yeah. Where it's like, this is, what they make, washer fluid out of to tell you not to drink it. So anyway. All right. So we'll switch gears. We'll get back to audiobooks and I'll quit telling my horror stories. So what inspired you? So actually talk a little bit more, because you did mention this earlier about how you got inspired to start your service.
Yeah, so it wasn't me. Again, I always give shout outs to Karik Salil, who I co-authored one of my books with, and he's the one who pushed me to like, hey, you should probably do audiobooks for indies. And I was like, okay, I'll try. And then I did it, and now like I said before, I'm full time with audio. 3 weeks into me going full time, I actually had a potential client who reached out to me I didn't realize who this client was. I thought it was just another author, so I was explaining everything that I did in the process without being nervous at all. And then halfway through, I realized that it was a representative from Macmillan Audio, and I was like, oh, good thing I did not know that you were from Macmillan, because I would have freaked out at the beginning of the whole thing.
That's understandable.
And so now I do audiobooks for them. I believe I've done something like 5 children's books, 1 full-length it was a weird mystery horror psychological thriller that I did for them, for the full novel. But also doing many other books for indies as well. Romance, science fiction, fantasy, middle grade, young adult, like all of it. Pretty much every genre almost.
Now, are you the main vocal talent for this, or do you have other people who work with you?
No, okay, yeah, that's actually a good question, because a lot of people ask me that all the time. I am not the narrator. I do a lot of narration for my own YouTube channel, and I know for a fact that I would hate myself as a narrator, because I would just flub all the time. And I flub on my little 20-minute, YouTube scripts, 10, 20-minute, YouTube scripts. A whole ass 11-hour, 12-hour audiobook would be horrendous for me. No, so I'm an engineer and producer. I work with a lot of local talent in Los Angeles, or I've opened up recently to remote talent. So in particular, I work with a gentleman in San Diego, John Joseph Rogers, and Ore Nash, who's out in DC. And I just get the audio, mix, master, make sure that it's ready for ACX or Findaway Voices or Audible, wherever it's being uploaded to, for the indie authors.
So when you are producing an audiobook, what are the elements that you think are absolutely necessary for an audiobook that will make it successful?
That's a broad one.
Yeah.
What makes it successful? Well, having a good narrator, that's first and foremost. Like, that will do half your job right there if you cast correctly. For me as the engineer, and also as you as an author client, casting properly will just alleviate so many other issues that can possibly arise from, like I'm saying, if I were to do someone's work, I would be flubbing all the freaking time, which would make the production schedule just, balloon from like, oh, we can get this done in a week to, oh, no, this is going to take 3 months. Congratulations, Or also just having a very naturalistic actor who is very good with not only that. I feel like a lot of narrators are very good with the dialogue and giving character to dialogue, but some tend to forget that the prose itself also is its own character. If you listen to really, really good narrators, they really send you on a journey with the prose, whether it's like, let's say that the text gets very quiet and somber. You as the narrator have to also feel that. You have to be empathetic to what the author's prose is doing. Or if there's an action scene and it's really exciting, you have to hurry up and get your tempo going. You have to make sure that the person on the other side knows that something is really, you have to really build on those hills and valleys. And if you can find a narrator at the core who does all of that, you'll make your production schedule and everything else like just streamline.
It's a really good point about the prose itself as a character.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've noticed with audiobooks, and it took me a really long time to put my finger on what it was that they were doing, but you'll have the few, just spectacular narrators who can do every voice in the world and all of that. But there's this other category, and I was just having these really great audiobook experiences, and they weren't doing voices to say, but it was their own voice just slightly shifted, but so well done. It was such a fascinating technique where it's achieving the goal of a changed voice or putting on an accent or something like that, but it's just so subtle. So anyway, they're just such a cool.
Neil Gaiman novels are a lot like that. His audio is a lot like that, especially the ones that he himself narrates. He doesn't do accents at all. He doesn't do anything like that. He just like you're saying, just varies the voices just a little bit, just in the same way that a parent might do with their kids. Not all the time a parent's going to be capable of doing accents, but they do change it up so that you can differentiate between the characters.
So speaking of Neil Gaiman and the like, can you give us a couple examples of audiobooks that you think are just spectacular, and then maybe talk a little bit about what it was about them that made them stand out for you?
Any Star Wars audiobook produced after, I want to say, 2001, I can definitely recommend. And it's what actually got me even into audiobooks in the first place, because Star Wars in particular has this thing where it's still very much a conventional audiobook in most cases where, you know, you have just the clean narration, nothing underneath it. They do also do audio dramas as well. But what they did is that at the start of a chapter, they'll have like, you know, hyperdrive sound going by, whatever, so you can signal, oh, is this scene break? Oh, there's a chapter break. Occasionally they'll have the music come in, and of course they have all these licensed music and sound effects from their Star Wars library that I already have. So you can have like lightsabers in the background as like there's a lightsaber duel going on, or like blaster fire, or music, John Williams score under it, you know. So all that stuff is really great, and I've sort of adapted that, or I've tried to get other author clients to adapt that as well, because you don't really need a whole lot. You don't need the full audio drama treatment, but even having that little bit goes a long way. It's really easy to do on the back end, but it actually really elevates your production quality quite a bit. That's a big compliment I get on my young adult series. At the start of my chapters, like I had location sound effects. So if we're about to enter into like an airport, then you have like the sounds of an airport. Or if you're about to go to the swamp where TJ goes for his magical camp, I'll have some swamp sound effects. You know, when he plays basketball at the beginning of the game, I have like kids on the playground playing basketball. And that stuff, like, and I don't have it playing all throughout the entire chapter. I just have it on the front end. So about 30 seconds, and has a really gradual fall off so that you don't even realize that it's kind of going away, and that you're kind of melding into the narrator's world as she's, you know, taking us through the story. But yeah, I forgot what the original question actually was.
No, that's good. It was about some examples of, you know, just outstanding audiobooks. Yeah, so you mentioned the Star Wars
anything
stuff.
After 2001. Yeah, especially in particular 2015 and onwards, when the Disney Inquisition happened. Their audiobooks are always phenomenal.
And thinking about the sound effects for scene and chapter breaks, is that something, if an author wants to include that in a book when they're working with you, is that something you would want them to bring to you? Or is that something that you would bring to them? Or is that something you would flesh out in conversation through the middle?
You mean the sound effects themselves, or just the idea of wanting to do that?
like from your position as the producer, would you be interested in somebody coming with a bunch of ideas for that, or is that something you would want to kind of hash out more when you're kind of in the nitty gritty of it all?
I guess it's like a back and forth. I mean, usually I'm the one who's trying to like explain to people that this is a really good thing to do, because I don't charge that much extra just to put like sound effects or music interludes, because it's just at the beginning of a chapter or in the middle of a scene break. And I'm like, it really helps a lot if you just do it. And usually it's me who provides sound effects, whatever that might be. But yeah, I haven't yet had, well, no, I've had a few. I had a few who actually came to me and like said, oh, I want this specific sound effects. But that was mostly when I do audio drama projects, which are like those full things where you have like sound effects throughout the entire, you know, situation.
Oh, so you do audio drama too then with your service?
Yes, audio drama, duet, dual, single narration, and we do the whole every type of audiobook that you can do.
That's fantastic.
We haven't done a full multicast yet. So the way we've done it so far is we had a duet where we just had, and it's a less expensive thing for the authors as well, is that you have just one female narrator and one male narrator, and they do all the female voices and male voices in that, you know, doing the different voices, whatever the characters might be. But I have not yet done a full cast where it's like, you know, each individual character is done by like a different person.
Yeah, that would be pretty intense.
Yeah.
God, yeah.
It's really expensive too, because you're paying like so many actors.
Oh God, yeah, I bet. Yeah. So how you know, thinking about, you know, scheduling and the actor's time and all of that, like for a standard single voice audiobook, how long is a typical I guess project you would say, like kind of front to back, say for a standard fantasy sized book?
Yeah. So let's say if we're doing 100,000 words, that's going to equate to about 10 hours. So that would take the actors probably 20 hours to do. Hold on, let me actually do like the full calculation. It would take the actors 20 hours to do something like that. For me, it would take 30 hours to edit all of that. And then sometimes we have like revisions, so we'll add maybe 5 hours onto that one for like if there's like revisions needed. So that would be around 55 hours of work that would need to be done. And that's not even including like preparation too, because then, you know, the actors have to like read the manuscript too. So that's probably a little bit on the more conservative side, 55 hours for a 10-hour audiobook.
That's
but a good calculation. Yeah, so the way to calculate it usually, and this is different for everybody, but it usually takes a narrator twice the amount of time it would for them to get a finished hour, and then 3 times for an engineer, editor, master to get all that prepped and ready.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So speaking of prepped and ready, this is good transitions for my questions. What can an author who's thinking about doing an audiobook, what can they expect when they come to you for a project? What would you, and on top of that, what would you like them to have ready for you? Is it literally just, here's the manuscript and some ideas, or is there more of a package that you would like them to come prepared with?
I mean, it really, really helps for the actors in particular if you have some sort of character breakdown and also a pronunciation guide, particularly for those fantasy folks out there.
Yeah, that makes
sometimes
sense.
like a client will forget, to do that, and then they'll get to a chapter, like the actor will get to a chapter and like just make up their own pronunciation because that's like the best they can do, or they'll go on Google and like try and find the best thing for it. And then sometimes, you have to like switch it up and stuff like that. So like the best thing, definitely, your manuscript, of course, like have that prepped and have it clean too, because sometimes people have like formatting in there that needs to be eliminated so that it can just be clean for the narrator just to look at what they need to read. But really, just the character breakdowns and pronunciation guides, like for sure. You need to make sure you have those, along with the manuscript when you're sending it off.
And speaking of manuscript formatting, do you prefer it shifted into like a script format, or is it just kind of a standard submission style manuscript?
For audio dramas, which have like sound effects, direction, stuff like that, that definitely needs to be converted into like a full-on script. But if it's a standard audio book, then no, just the manuscript on its own is fine.
Gotcha. Okay, so pulling back a little bit, do you feel like any book can be made into audio, or do you feel like there are certain books that lend themselves more, or maybe certain books that just don't translate quite as well into an audio format?
No, I think every book can be turned into audio, just in the same way that, it's an old-timey thing that we've done for like years and years on the fireside. Like we started with audiobooks, it seems like we're just like reverting back to what we were doing, thousands and thousands of years ago.
Totally, yeah.
But there are certain, I would say, like I was saying before, how I write with audio in mind when I do my own work. There are certain, that's why you sometimes get abridged audiobooks, because certain writing doesn't lend itself to audio. But I think that's usually more of a nitpicky thing that you can usually like alter it pretty easily to make it work for audio, whether we're talking about nonfiction or fiction. In particular, nonfiction gets a little bit difficult sometimes because there's like graphs and things like that they refer to. They're like, hey, refers to figure 1.13 or whatever, But more often than not, everything can pretty much be turned into audio.
And when it comes to people coming to you, I know for me as an indie author, the idea of doing an audiobook is a little bit intimidating, because it just seems like such a, we've got our KDPs and our Ingram Sparks and stuff like that, and we can handle that. That's in our wheelhouse. It's on our computer. But this feels like, like the production quality and dealing with so many outside sources. It's a big step. What are some tips or suggestions you have for people just to even get their head around approaching doing an audiobook?
First, like I really said, just if you get the right narrator, your all your worries kind of like just whatever, everything else is fine. But I would say try to be a fan of audio, because sometimes I'll have clients who just don't even I don't listen to audiobooks myself. I don't know, so they don't really know what to find that is good or bad about an audiobook. Because if you're not a fan of them, then you don't know what's expected. In the same way that when we write to market or we do market research, you have to do that same sort of thing for audio as well. Like if you get someone who's done a bunch of children's books and you're having them do your erotica, you might not want that. And that's a pretty obvious one. But even just the more nuanced version of it, there's just certain kinds of narrator voices that lend themselves better to certain genres. And that's something that should definitely be something that should be on people's radar when they're doing the audio stuff. But also, there's always options out there. There's ACX, which is the Audiobook Creation Exchange, which runs through Audible and iTunes, or Apple Books, I should say. I think one other thing too. And there's Findaway Voices out there, voices.com. If you're on Clubhouse, the new app, the new social media voice-only app, there's a bunch of narrators you can find on there too. And also just resources of people, Clubhouse in particular, resources of industry professionals who are talking every week about, things that are going on in the industry.
Quick question, actually, thinking about the narrators and finding them. Is it kind of a similar world to acting where there are casting directors or casting services that kind of have these, collections of talent that they work with, or is it more of an indie, like kind of self-employed people pitching themselves for the narration?
So if you're working with one of the bigger publishers, so we're talking about Podium, Tantor, Macmillan, they usually have their own talent pool.
Oh, but, I see. Okay.
I mean, a lot of times they are actually reaching out to other independent narrators. They always have those talent pools because they worked with those people before, and they're like, okay, it's very similar to when you see like a movie and you're like, oh man, Martin Scorsese, he's working with Leonardo DiCaprio again. It's like, because they like each other, and that's the reason. And the same thing with these bigger companies. It's like, oh, well, we've worked with them and we know what to expect, so like we don't want to rock the boat. But mostly it's all independent contract work. Even I was just recently realized this and going to the conference that a lot of these companies are just getting open submissions from people. There's not actually really, in the audiobook world, there aren't really agents or managers. It's really just people submitting their own audio. So if it's something if there's a narrator who's listening, you can break in, I'm going to say easily, but you can break in without the gatekeeping of, having to have like the agent or manager. You can just buy your own talent of your voice. So again, making sure you have the proper equipment, making sure, your room is treated and all that. If you send us a clean audio file and you've got the talent for it, you definitely can get hired without having to go through a bunch of, hoops.
Nice. All right, let's jump back to our drink real quick. So one thing I like to do with my writer guests is talk about the mood of the drink and the setting. And if you're willing, could you paint us a picture, maybe, do some world building of the perfect setting for you when you're having a Moscow Mule?
Well, I'm kind of cheating because I had this. So my girlfriend's birthday, we went to Hawaii, and this is where I mentioned when I had the tropical mood, and they had shut down the restaurant that we were intending to go, and they're like, oh, well, they are reconstructing their thing right now, so they're actually in the luxury hotel that we had passed by earlier. We're like, oh, we can just go in there, and they're like, yeah, that's where the restaurant's being held, in like the ballroom. So we were to go out to like this really nice balcony overlooking, a Hawaiian ocean. You know how beautiful freaking Hawaii is. You can see like the rocks underneath. A nice company. They had like really nice little jazzy music and stuff like that. And I had like my little tropical mule right there with my girlfriend, and like eating, I think we had like ceviche and like maybe like some sort of like salmon salad thing or whatever. But it was just like, very nice.
That does sound very good. Nice and fresh. And
very fresh.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So when an author is in the process of having their audiobook produced, how involved are they? How much input do they have? Is it kind of a set it and forget it and then can receive their finished product, or are they an integral part in the whole mix?
It's entirely up to the indie. And that's the whole point of AB Book Services in particular, is being flexible for the indie author. Because sometimes you'll see like these big per finished hour rates, like you'll see like $300, $400 per finished hour, but not really know what's going into each of that. Like you don't know where like that portion, where this portion is. So what I do is I kind of have an a la carte system where you can put in as much as you want or take out as much as you want, depending on what you want. For instance, a big one that almost always happens is that proofing is something that's usually, attached to that big per finished hour. I just take that out because I'm like, well, most times when I'm working with indie authors, they want to listen to their own audiobook and like make sure that they go through it. So I'm like, okay, hey, I will not do the proofing process, so I can mitigate that price a little bit. That's something you guys are going to do anyway, so I don't need to like double up that workload. But of course, still having that there for people who do want that. Because I do have certain authors who are like that, who just are like, no, I don't care anything, just send it off, and I just want to make sure it's good. or things like I was saying, like the sound effects I'll take out, or live directing, manuscript prep. It's a bunch of things that I can like take out that either the author can do themselves, especially as an indie because they're very hands-on, or if they want to be hands-off, or I'm working with a bigger publisher where I'm just basically just getting like the files and nothing else. And that's possible too. Just making sure that I'm flexible with all that.
Nice. And so if there's an author that is thinking about tackling an audiobook for themselves, what would be some key pieces of advice you would have for them? Maybe some just mandatory pieces of gear that they're gonna need, stuff like that.
So you're saying someone who is trying to self-narrate their own
yes
book, correct?
Someone who's gonna bite that eat that whale one bite at a time.
So USB microphones are completely viable. There's actually a video, I think, on voices.com's YouTube channel, and they do like a 2021 recommended mics. I think the Blue Yeti is still like one of the top, mics you can get. I think it's like $100 USB mic. Very good. The only thing with these mics sometimes that you just need to make sure that you're treating your room. So that's finding a very good place, or a closet. Like when I first started recording my YouTube videos, I literally just went into my closet with all my coats. And that was, even to this day, I have not found a space. And that was my first apartment. I have not found another space that has the perfect acoustics. I don't know what it was about that closet and the way that the coats were placed, but that was the perfect scenario. So now I have PVC pipe and acoustic blankets that I use now. Smart. For my booth. And there's a lot of DIY stuff that you can do for all that. So, you don't have to start with the USB, not USB, the XLR microphones where you have to get like an entire interface and, all this extra equipment. You can start with just the USB microphone first. Just make sure your room is treated in some way, whether you're getting into a closet, if you're doing the whole PVC pipe and acoustic blankets, or if you're just, in your office space with like I'm sure you've seen like not the cardboard, they're acoustic like squares that you can have that have little, they look like milk cartons or egg cartons sort of a little bit, but they're like foamy, you can get those too, the acoustic foams.
And what, just real quick, explain for the audience, when you say treated, what is that and what is it doing for them? What is that treatment adding or subtracting?
Yeah, what you're really trying to do is reduce echo, because that is a thing. You'll get a lot of reverb, and it makes your audio not as pretty as it can be. And that's mostly what you're doing when you're trying to treat a room, is that you're just trying to reduce the echo that can naturally happen, especially in a bigger room. Like if you've ever been in a church or a cathedral, I'm sure you've heard the reverb in there when someone speaks. It's bouncing off all these high walls. Because you really want, especially for vocals and narration, you want a dead sound, basically. Mostly so you can manipulate it later, but also because you just don't want anything really distracting. You just want a very clean piece of audio.
And so when you're producing an audiobook, or when someone's trying to create their own audiobook, what are some of the common mistakes you see? This, like if you're listening to other people's work, what are some of those common mistakes that you see coming up again and again? And what would be some ways that people can avoid those?
High noise floor would be one, and that's like kind of like the background hiss that you'll sometimes hear. Usually the issue with that is just proximity and just making sure that your leveling is correct, or it could be something wrong with your system itself. But usually it's just placement of your mouth ahead of your microphone. Usually you only need to be about 3 to 6 inches off of your microphone to really get it, especially if you're getting a cardioid microphone, which is what this one is here. Mm-hmm. Basically, it only shoots out in a very narrow path out to my mouth, versus like if you get one that is more open, you'll get a lot more unnecessary sound for vocals. But yeah, noise floor, making sure people need to manage their noise floors a little bit better sometimes. Sometimes breaths aren't reduced, or mouth clicking isn't edited out. Those are really hard to do when you start off, because you do have to go in and look at the individual pieces and cut that out. But there's other tools you can use. Like I use a program called Isotope RX9, which has a built-in mouth click remover, which gets not all of them, but most of them out, because they're able to identify mouth clicks and get those things out. So just small technical stuff. But if you are going to narrate it yourself, be sure you have at least maybe like an acting coach or a voice coach of some sort, because people think that, I could just read it. But to be an engaging reader, there's a different skill set to that.
For sure.
Than just we all heard it when we were in high school or like middle school when we were all learning to read and we had to dip popcorn. And you knew there was those two are three kids in the room that just like made the text breeze by, and those ones who really struggled. You definitely don't want to be one of the ones who struggled. You want to be one who's just getting through it very cleanly.
So thinking about kind of the issues with audiobooks and things that come up, what are some of your pet peeves that you've come across when checking out, market research and checking out other people's audiobooks, or maybe even pet peeves that come up in your own that just the stuff that really drives you nuts?
Peeves. Oh, I do have a pet peeve, actually. Yes, this is one that I'm anti, and it's already kind of happening now because we have AI like trying to pop up and do like audiobooks for like nonfiction and such. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves of a narrator is when they sound like a robot. Like if I hear a narration and it's just very monotonous, there's absolutely no character to it, even in nonfiction. I want to hear a person behind the words. I don't want to hear a robot, like me personally. I know people are being okay with that now with the AI stuff that's popping up, but me personally, I want to hear like from a human. That's like one. I will not even listen to audiobook. There's a story. I'm not going to blast them because I don't want to do that. But there is a young adult a novel that I really, really enjoyed. One of my favorite novels of I think 2019. I think it was or 2018 when it came out. And then it came out with an audiobook like a year later. But the narration was so robotic and monotone. I love this story, and I was like, well, I guess I'm only going to engage with the the print version or the ebook version. So yeah, that's a huge pet peeve for me. Any kind of monotonous reading will just kill the audiobook vibes for me instantly.
Yeah, I know that makes total sense. Okay, so similar question but flipped. What are some things that you want to see more? What are some of the either cool new trends or just certain techniques that aren't used enough that you really think are valuable, or just ones you really enjoy?
I definitely want to see more music and sound effects being used in standard audiobooks, not like the full audio drama where it's like, spaced out in like the entire part of the narration. Cause I do get that could be distracting. It is even distracting to me. But yeah, just having more use of interlude sound effects and, music just to get us from one section to the other. And that's something that's super distracting. I would like to see that a lot more. And also just a lot of more, I would like to see more duet narration, not necessarily like the full cast, like I was saying, but just having like two actors who can just do the multiple voices throughout the story. No, it's definitely more expensive and, it's more involved, but I think something like that would be really, really cool to see more of.
Yeah. I'm listening to Ben Galley's Chasing Graves book. I don't know if you heard the audio on that one. They had the narrators. It's a duet narration on that, and it's very, very good. I personally in the audiobooks I've experienced, I haven't come across too many of the duets, but they are, it does add an extra dimension, All right, Antoine, it is last call here at the Indie Pub. Can you give an indie published book or two or three or more that you want more people to check out?
The one I first followed is a gentleman named Garrett Robertson. He is the author of the Underrealm series. That is one I would definitely recommend. Besides him, there's one that I encountered recently called Starlion by Leanne Langford. We did the audiobook for him. It's basically an anime book. I think they call them light novels in Japan. But if you're into like anime, definitely would recommend that one for sure. If you're into like middle grade fantasy, Vona Stewart's Shadow Sovereign series is one that I would recommend as well. And in terms of like romance, because we've done a lot of romance recently, Gio Tomas, she does a lot of good contemporary romance, engaging with some of like the newer thoughts that we have around marriage, or not marriage, but relationships in general. So like polyamory and a lot of good LGBT representation in her works as well. So yeah, I think those are the ones I could recommend. Like I think I got like all my recommendations out. Yeah. Cool.
All right, and then so same question, but for any other media, indie or not, books or not, whatever, just what is it you're enjoying right now?
I mean, I would say Squid Game, but everybody's already like, the whole world's like they just greenlit the season 2 of Squid Game.
Yeah, my wife just finished it, and it's like she's like, "Oh, can I watch it by myself?" It's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll get to it later." And she watched it in like 2 or 3 days, and now she's just like, "Oh my god, you have to watch it so I can talk to you about it." And I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. It's I've heard people shows. It's one of those shows. Well, okay. Well, apparently there's somebody here who hasn't watched it. So yeah, that's what I'll say right there. The Squid Game. I think it peaks at episode 6, personally.
Okay. Is it one of those like 9 episode-ish?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's 9 episodes. Yeah,
Okay.
I personally think it peaks at episode 6, but like that journey to that point was like super, super stellar. And it's not like it goes like dismally. It's not like Game of Thrones like final season where it just goes dismally bad. It just wasn't as good as what I felt from that episode in particular.
Gotcha. All right, so go ahead and tell our listeners what you have going on right now and where they can find you and your work.
So you can find literally everything about me at AntoineBandele.com. That's AntoineBandele.com. You'll find my social media, you'll find my book services, my works, all there. I am currently working on book 2 of the T.J. Young in the Orishas series called The Wind and Weaver's Storm. Currently heading into Act 3 of that draft. Currently, I'm working on a romance right now called Obsession, which is our first polyamory book that we've actually got, which I'm really interested in. Hoping to speak with when I went to 20 Book Vegas, I talked to an author who was doing a female lesbian romance, which I was like, oh yeah, I would really love to do that. Like I want to do all of that sort of stuff. So that's what I'm working on right now, a romance audiobook and my own young adult fantasy book at the moment.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Indie Pub. If you like what you hear, consider giving us a like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our indie investigations or boozy banter. I've been your host, Jay Rushing, and we'll see you back in the pub next time.